Hello and welcome to another episode of Rico'S Rants. I'm your host, Rico DiGiorgio. Alright, so I saw some movies recently, and clearly I have to talk about them. It had been years since I had seen The Karate Kid. I mean, the original series, and even the next Karate Kid with Hilary Swank. So, working at a video store, I said, fuck it, let's rewatch them. So, I saw all four original ones with Mr. Miyagi. Not the remake with fucking Will Smith Jr. and fucking Jackie Chan. Which when I first saw it in theaters in 2010, I was like, I mean Jackie Chan's cool, but this is just really ridiculous. I'll have to rewatch it again at some point, but I'm pretty sure my opinion of it's not going to change that much. So without further ado, The Karate Kid. So first of all, assuming that you have not seen it, The Karate Kid is essentially about this kid named Daniel LaRusso, Italian American kid from Newark, not New York, moving to Reseda in Los Angeles. So while he's there, he gets bullied by these kids, by these bigger, tougher guys who also happen to be students of the local karate dojo. So he has an attraction to one girl, and the lead bully is also her ex boyfriend. So of course they start antagonizing him, and also he's a new guy at school, and he's sort of a Italian American Newark runt, who's sort of ballsy and to be fair, Daniel LaRusso belts one of the main bully, Johnny, in the face, sort of defending the girl. So of course the gang beats the shit out of him more than once and is always picking on him. At the same time, the handyman at Daniel's new apartment is a Okinawa immigrant. Basically, Okinawa is China, as he phrases it, China here, Japan here, Okinawa here. Like, he's off the shore of Japan, essentially. Little tiny Asian immigrant who speaks broken English named Mr. Miyagi, played brilliantly by Pat Morita. And he is very much, he looks very stern. He's got, sort of sharp features. When he first meets Daniel, he is, Daniel goes to him and says, hey, the faucet upstairs is leaking. And he just says, okay, come back later. I'll fix later. And in very chopped English. So, of course, Daniel is sort of put off by this guy. But at one point later, Daniel gets jumped by the whole group of karate kids. No pun intended. And Mr. Miyagi jumps in and knocks the fuck out of these kids, showing off prowess of martial arts and karate that, like, essentially it's kind of like looking at Yoda, because this guy is the Yoda of the Karate Kid franchise. He's shorter, he's old, does not look intimidating in any stretch. He has no muscles, he's just this little guy. And he fucks these bullies up. And then he goes with Daniel to the local karate dojo that the bullies train at. Goes to their teacher. I think his name is... he's an old Vietnam veteran, and he is just like, basically saying kill. Like, you're show no mercy. Basically teaches the wrong form of karate as a way of attacking your opponent instead of using karate to defend yourself. And they try to talk out of it and say, look, these kids have been beating up Daniel, please leave us alone. And because the teacher, Reese, is a racist, because he served in Vietnam, he looks at all Asians as the same. He of course, does not take kindly to Mr. Miyagi's kindness and respect and request. So he says, "Let's handle this, right now." And Mr. Miyagi says, "No, we'll handle this at a tournament. And there's a tournament happening in a couple weeks." So, and then he says, "Let Daniel train. Have the boys leave us alone so Daniel can train, and then we'll have it all out in the tournament." Basically, now Daniel has to fight these fucking guys. But luckily, he's given some time to train. So, Daniel is sort of like, all right, if we're going to do this, let's do this. So, he goes to Mr. Miyagi's house, which is off on the wrong side of the tracks. And on the outside, you would expect it looks like a fucking dump. But as soon as they go inside, it's a very... It looks straight out of an Okinawa or Japanese village. It's bamboo and very beautiful, and there's bonsai trees, and it's just like looking at Mr. Miyagi. Looks are deceiving, and that's how it is. And so Daniel gets all gun ho, and he says, "Let's we're ready to train," and he says, "Okay, you wash ka." And he tells him to wax on and wax off, doing it like this and like this, and then painting up and down with the flick of the wrist, and sand the floor, which is this way and this way instead of this way or this way. And so he basically, at first glance, seems like he's using Daniel just to do housework and cleaning his car and painting his fence and sanding this shit and all this. And he's working Daniel for hours and hours. And of course Daniel is like, "What the fuck is this? I thought we were doing karate. When are you going to teach me how to punch? When are you going to teach me how to break a board?" That kind of thing. So this goes on for days. Finally Daniel snaps and says, "I've had it, man. I'm done with your bullshit. I'm leaving." And Mr. Miyagi calls him back. And by the way, again, sorry, spoilers in advance. Sorry, I know it's 7 minutes in, but spoilers. I'll even put spoilers at the beginning of this. So he tells him, he's gonna come back. He says, "Show me wax on, wax off." So he says, "I can't move my arm." So he does this thing that has now been mimicked, which is, and then heals his arm. His arm is now fine. He has this weird type of healing. It's not the force. It's not powers. It's just he knows a sort of Zen, Buddhist, Okinawa old school way of healing someone through energy or whatever the fuck. So he tells him, "Show me, wax on, wax off." So he goes like this, and then all of a sudden, Mr. Miyagi attacks him and throws a punch, and through instinct and muscle memory, Daniel blocks it. And so he starts blocking him through kicks and punches using wax on, wax off, and sand the floor, and whatever the fuck wash the car and paint, and so he's deflecting all these things. So now the real training comes. Now, you have to remember, if you've seen Rocky, this is very reminiscent of Rocky because it's the same director, John G. Alvinson, and I didn't know this, but Alvinson has directed, I think, all the first 3 of these films, and I was surprised because usually for sequels, you would get another director, another, lower director than someone of this stature, but John G. Alvinson stuck with this franchise. And I'll talk about the other ones as well, but I'm not going to ruin the first film. But like I said, if you had seen Rocky, you know it's an underdog story. There's the composer is the same. Bill Conti from Rocky does this, and the music is very good because it's very reminiscent of. It has a Japanese Asian feel to it. I mean, it sounds like something that you would listen to if you went to a Japanese restaurant, and that's nothing against. I mean, I'm not saying Japanese music and Okinawa music is the same, but it sounds like your stereotypical Asian music and flows very well. And it also has a lot of 80s theme to it, a lot of 80s music, And they talk in the 80s style, and in particular, Daniel is very much a fish out of water. He's plucked from the East Coast and thrust into the West Coast. He looks different. He sounds different. He talks different. He talks different. um, and then you watch as this beautiful friendship and mentor and father figure between Mr. Miyagi and Daniel unfolds. I also have to mention that you find out that Daniel's father had died in the second film. So, without spoiling the endings, I'll get to the second film. The second film, now they're in Okinawa. Mr. Miyagi's father is ill, so now they fly to Okinawa. So I actually, because it had been years since I'd seen all three of these films, I was expecting to not like the other films as much as the first film, because the first film is a fucking classic. Honestly, if you have not seen the original Karate Kid, go see the original Karate Kid. It still holds up. I mean, Pat Morita's performance is an Oscar nominated. He really should have won. I don't know who won in 1985, but he was fantastic in it, and he was just because he's a comedic actor, and he speaks very normally. He's not from Okinawa or Japan. He's very much, I think he was born like Hayward or something. Um, so he talks like how you and I will talk if you're from America. So he thickened up and short clipped this real thick Okinawa accent. Daniel-san, come here. That kind of shit. So now they're in Okinawa, and of course there's like another person that Daniel has to fight, and there's a lot of rich culture in that film. What it shows, a small tiny village, and all about grudges and honor and feuds, and there's a rivalry between Mr. Miyagi and his old friend that feels dishonored because Miyagi fell in love with the woman that he was supposed to be betrothed to, essentially, and it's also his best friend. So and when they challenge each other to a fight at that time, it was very much a fight to the death fight. So that's an interesting story. I loved watching the culture of it. And the third film is another revenge film, in particular from the Vietnam veteran teacher of the Cobra Kai dojo, the karate dojo that trains the bullies in the first film. There's a situation that happens where now the Vietnam veteran teacher Reese, I think his name is Reese. It's got to be Reese. Is feels shamed and he wants revenge for what, and I won't spoil it. So he gets an old army buddy who is very rich to sort of fuck with Miyagi and fuck with Daniel. Now he's an expert martial artist as well. And again, I mean, this is one of the weaker ones, but I was really kind of blown away by the villain in this one, and I can't remember the actor's name, but his name is Terry Silver, the character is. And he's a good-looking, vibrant, rich guy, but he's sinister and cruel. But he puts on a facade and hangs out with Daniel and starts teaching Daniel an aggressive form of karate, basically to attack. And he slowly manipulates him and lets Daniel not be himself and sort of disregard all the teaching that he had gotten from Miyagi, which is avoid fighting at all costs, but if you have to fight, win, blah, blah, blah. And so it was really an interesting, because I watched these one after another, it's really interesting to see Daniel just sort of unfold and become he's essentially becoming the Johnny character in the first film, the bully. He's being more aggressive, he's being, he's shoving Miyagi away, and there's, I mean, honestly, the trilogy itself is a fantastic film. That being said, jumping ahead, they made another one called The Next Karate Kid, or in some states or some countries, Karate Kid Part 4. Pat Morita comes back as Mr. Miyagi, but this time it's a girl. Essentially, it was lazy writing. They're like, oh, well, Ralph Macchio doesn't want to come back because and this is his quote, he's like, he doesn't want to be the Sylvester Stallone of the Karate Kid movies. Meaning Sylvester Stallone kept making Rocky films, one after another. So they got a very young Hilary Swank. This is pre-Oscar win for Boys Don't Cry, but she is, she's still got acting charms, but she's essentially just playing a stereotypical angry teenage girl. She's whatever the fuck she is, 15, 16 years old. And it's all about how her grandfather was an old army buddy of Mr. Miyagi and how he has died. And there's a funeral, and Mr. Miyagi shows up, and he sort of sticks around and watches the little girl, the Hilary Swank's character, Julie, is angry as shit because both of her parents died in a car accident. She lashes out at everyone, blah, blah, blah. So he sticks around and is basically teaching her karate to let go of her anger. And really, basically, the plot itself is just kind of ridiculous. The film is not great. But I do remember watching it when I was a kid and finding it entertaining because it's very much a 90s film, but it's more comedic. There's more sort of slapsticky type situations. There's a whole bunch of monks in it, and they're very serious monks, but then they become very comedy relief, and there's a lot of... It's just not a very good film. Although, I mean, I can't remember... I wouldn't say if it's better or not than the 2010 remake. I have to rewatch the 2010 remake. So, like I said, the first three films... I mean, look, if I'm being really honest, the first film, I would give it 5 stars. It's a classic. It is... I mean, I started crying at one point during situations, and in the second one, I would give that 3.5 stars. I still like the film, but it's definitely a weaker one. The actor who plays the antagonist in the second one, Miyagi's old friend who now has a feud against him, the actor who portrayed him really had a interesting choice where he's so aggressive and he's so angry, but he like, Mr. Miyagi just kind of yells and he, even when he's talking over, like, you come and you dishonor myself, you coward. Like, really, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but I'm really not at the same time because it's really that ridiculous. Where, like, he's talking normally, but he just sounds so aggressive and angry, and you're just like, fucking dude, chill. Like, relax. The third one, I would give 2 stars. And then the fourth one, I would give 1.5 stars. I mean, it's not great. Hilary Swank is beautiful, and Pat Morita is still entertaining as Mr. Miyagi, but other than that, I mean, that's really it. So, what'd you guys think of my review? If you guys agreed to it, or if you disagreed with it, let me know. What would you like me to review next? And, I don't know. I'll end this with wax on and wax off. Bye, guys.